Good afternoon and happy Labor Day, everyone. Josh is Severe Weather, and I hope you guys are having a great September so far. We're going to talk about the tropics and some significant changes in the thinking of what may happen here over the next couple of weeks. Some that continue to confuse a lot of us, but also teach us that we cannot rely on the models just yet until storms actually form. And I'm humbled by this, but at the same time, I can never say never. I still think we are dealing with a storm that's going to try to form here at the end of the week across the northwestern Caribbean. The waters are very warm. Now, the models have backed off on how soon this can form, and that is obviously good news for those of us in the Caribbean, also across the southeast. But we are going to see some complicated steering in the longer term forecast as this system potentially makes it into the southwestern Gulf and into an area where it may get stuck for a while. And that means we still need to keep an eye on it on the Gulf. Obviously, nothing to get too concerned with at this point. And if the models continue to trend the way they are now, then this may actually not even be really much of an issue for anybody other than Mexico, Belize, and maybe portions of Central America. But it's not yet time to make that kind of a call yet and rule this out. So I'm going to talk about what we're going to be looking at here, because I do think it's still important to take a look at what's going on and what may happen here in the next couple of weeks. Right now, the Atlantic still has a lot of thunderstorm activity, very active monsoon trough here across the central and eastern Atlantic, but very unfavorable conditions for anything to actually form. We're seeing a ton of rain. We're seeing a lot of moisture, but we're just not seeing the storm spin up just yet. Things are a little bit too hostile for that to happen. So there are three areas we're watching. One near the coast of Texas that doesn't look super likely to develop. One over the eastern Caribbean that is going to get into a more favorable spot here later in the week. And one that is moving off of Africa that's actually absorbing a wave out ahead of it and has the potential to be some sort of a storm here probably in the next 5 to 7 days. In the Pacific, things have quieted down for the most part. The remains of Shanshan still linger over central Japan, but unlikely to become much of anything else. There's also an area to watch south of that. We have the remains of Hona, which is now just a leftover low-pressure system. But we have seen more action here in the far western Pacific. One system has formed over northern Philippines. That is now Tropical Storm Yagi, and that is likely to become a typhoon heading towards far southern China and maybe Vietnam, and then a lingering low-pressure system near Oman as well. But we're not really going to get too concerned about that. So this is a look here from Tomerberg's website of our three areas to watch. The first area is very close to land, just producing heavy rain at this point. Nothing really to be super concerned with aside from the rain. This is unlikely to spin up into anything like a tropical storm or even a hurricane. It's just going to kind of sit around and eventually kind of drift inland and get sheared apart, but continue to produce rainy weather over parts of Texas into Louisiana, even Mississippi over the next few days. The two systems to watch haven't formed yet. You can see we're not looking at development now over the next couple of days in the eastern or even central Caribbean, but once things move towards Jamaica and the waters are at their warmest, we will start to see more favorable weather for development here. And because of this later development, there's no longer likely to be something that tries to move up in this direction. It's more than likely heading in this direction and here. Now, when it gets into this region, there's going to be a lot more growing uncertainty on where it goes, if it forms. And again, 60% chance it doesn't even form. We had a wave over in here that's no longer likely to develop, but a new one moving off of Africa may sort of envelop it here, and we may see something try to form here towards the end of this upcoming week into the weekend. Interesting stuff going on here in the Atlantic as well as the rest of the world. We just see a lot of extremes. The waters of the tropics remain extremely warm. The Western Pacific, record warmth, as well as the Northern Pacific here. However, that doesn't necessarily mean we are seeing more storms. In fact, it's been one of the quietest starts to the year worldwide. Now, the Atlantic saw a record hurricane here with Beryl that moved in early in the season into the Caribbean, eventually towards Texas, and of course the Yucatan as well, and Jamaica. But that was kind of an anomaly. The rest of the season's been relatively quiet. We've had more development close to land and a lot less development out here. And a lot of that reason is due to the fact that the northern Atlantic is running record hot. This is actually somewhat detrimental to waves that come across Africa. We need this to be a little bit cooler and this area here to be a little bit warmer, but they're kind of flipped at this point. And it's something I honestly did not catch earlier in the season. I think the hyperactive season it's tough to say because we're not even to the halfway point, but it's looking a lot less likely. And I will take a loss on that. I'm okay with that, honestly. I think we all are to be. I mean, yeah, no one likes to get it wrong, but I would rather be um, wrong because it's not going to be as bad than the other way around. Still, though, with all this warm water here across the main development area, especially heading towards the Gulf and Caribbean, all it's going to take is one system to get into a favorable spot to very quickly develop. We saw that with Beryl here, and we certainly can see that again here as we get into September and October. So very, I'm learning, as a meteorologist, been doing this 20 years. No year is ever the same. It's really tough to look at an analog and say, well, it looks a lot like this season. We're kind of in uncharted waters here. So what I will say, though, is that we are seeing significant cooling in the areas that have been the warmest here. The Western Pacific and the Northern Atlantic are all cooling down significantly. So we are seeing maybe what could be a longer term shift towards more active weather across all regions of the tropics, believe it or not, even though we're towards the halfway point of the season now. So definitely don't want to write things off just yet. But often we say in the wintertime, it's too cold for a snowstorm. We can almost say the same thing in the summer when it's too warm for a strong hurricane. There's things that go on where we need to see moisture in place. We need to see some lift in the atmosphere and some instability. And sometimes it's just too stable to see something like that happen, whether it be on the hot side or the cold side. Now we are drifting towards La Nina. I don't think we're seeing a strong La Nina at any point, but we are heading towards a light La Nina and eventually maybe a moderate one towards the winter time, but not moving very quickly towards that. It's just a gradual process, which is fine with me. Nobody wants to see one extreme shift to the other. That could obviously lead to some very bad weather, but we are heading in that direction. So in theory, things should again be more active here for the second half of the Atlantic hurricane season. So let's talk about what's going on now here. And I'm going to run through this a lot more quickly here. I wanted to bring that up because I think it's really important to see what's going on at the larger scale, not just look at every model and see how it's adjusting. Larger scale weather obviously is a lot more important, big picture, when it comes to making these kind of forecasts. So we see here area of disturbed weather in the northwestern Gulf, tropical wave here moving into the eastern Caribbean, a little bit of a wave here over the central Atlantic, a bigger wave that has moved off of Africa. And then we've got a lingering front here that's going to bring wet weather to Florida and the southeast coast. And that's right over the Gulf Stream where waters are pretty warm. So as long as the wind shear stays high, nothing should develop. But there's a chance that we could still see something kind of hang out in here long enough to maybe form into something weak as we get towards the later part of this week. Here's the Gulf. And again, nothing super concerning other than the fact that it's just very wet over the Texas coastline, over parts of southwest Florida, and also off of the southeastern coast of the United States. Here's a look at the visible satellite from weatherbell.com, and you can see just nothing really trying to spin up over the Gulf. We continue to kind of go through cycles here where at night storms will blow up, and then during the day they kind of reach a minimum and then try to redevelop. But at this point, there's no circulation anywhere in here, so I don't think that we're going to see a storm develop at this point, and most of our model guidance would agree with that. We do obviously have to keep an eye on the areas of heavy rain here, southwest Florida, as well as off the coast of the Carolinas. Where I live here in Raleigh, we just got crushed again yesterday with heavy rain, but that boundary is moving away. Over the next week, we are still going to see heavy amounts of rainfall near the coast, especially 4 to 6 inches of rain, also across the south central Gulf Coast, Mobile, Pensacola, Pascagoula, maybe over to New Orleans. Significant rain will be possible as well. And same goes for Florida. You can see there's a front coming down that's going to stall here, and we will see significant amounts of rain, maybe over 6 inches for some localized spots here in northern Florida, as well as the Florida Panhandle. But the heaviest rain should shift to the offshore waters here of the Carolinas. Another look here at the Gulf and certainly the Caribbean. You can see just a lot of wind shear dropping down here, sinking stable air. And as a result, we've just got a very disheveled wave here moving into the eastern Caribbean. 4 days ago, this system was off to the races and developing. Things have changed, though, and those models just got it wrong. And until something does actually form, we will continue to see poor forecasting skill here from our models. And I can show them to you all day, but they're going to continue to struggle here until something actually does form, and that may not be for a few more days. Here's a look at the radar from windy.com. Heavy rain and thunderstorms north of Puerto Rico, scattered showers over the eastern Caribbean, some heavy rain moving towards Trinidad and Tobago here, as well as the Grenadines this morning and into the afternoon. but nothing showing any kind of signs of organization. Here's another look here at the Southwest Atlantic. Quiet, great weather in Bermuda. All the unsettled weather is along the East Coast, and that will spread up into Nova Scotia and Newfoundland here. Here's a look farther east of the islands, and you can see, again, a lot of stable sinking air here, keeping things basically at bay. We do have this one wave that's trying to pulse into something, but no longer looks like it's going to develop. The Hurricane Center's pretty much written it off for dead here. And then in the eastern Atlantic, a more formidable wave here that's moved off of Africa south of the Cabo Verde Islands that's probably going to absorb this one here and may have a chance to develop when it gets here. But I just say chance at this point. I don't think it's a super high chance just yet. And then it's still very wet across the African Saharan region. In fact, we're seeing incredible amounts of rain in an area that just doesn't even get it. And these waves will continue to move off and will gradually die as they do so. It just doesn't look like anything's got a chance at forming. If you look at this rain across the Sahara, it is extreme. We've never seen rain like this across the Sahara. Look at Algeria and southern Libya here and Mali and Chad. Just a lot of rainfall in place here. And so there's no shortage of moisture. In fact, it's just extremely wet. But it takes more than just rain to get something to go. It takes more than warm waters to get something to go. So let's take a look at what the models are trying to guess at here. I say try because I think we're all just trying at this point. One feature still to watch here towards the end of the week and towards the weekend, Belize, Honduras, northeastern Guatemala, and southern Yucatan seem to be the most likely places where we could see something spin up. We also look like we may see something form here over the central Atlantic towards the end of the week. Now, fast forward into next week, and we just see a lot of uncertainty here. Everything that comes off starts to look less and less certain over time. This is next Tuesday into Wednesday, the 10th and 11th. But we still have something to watch here in the Western Gulf. And the longer it takes to develop, the more likely it kind of gets stuck here in the Southwest Gulf. And that's something we'll be watching. Now, I will say the wind shear is still very strong here, very strong easterlies here across the main development, very strong westerlies just north of it. And you just have a very slight window for something to actually form over the eastern Atlantic. The Southwest Caribbean looks a little bit better, but it's hostile until it gets to near Jamaica. So this area is going to be a no-go for development. And you can see whatever's trying to form here near Texas is in an area of higher wind shear, extremely high wind shear over the southeast. So we really have just a very narrow window to see anything try to form in here. And right now there's nothing in that area. It's in an area of pretty stable air for the time being. Now, over time, as we move this along into next week, you can see things just don't look all that great for development. So it's very possible nothing even forms out of this. We just have been sitting here worrying about nothing. Doesn't that seem like life? But until we can clear this area, we just can't say that yet for certain. There's still quite a few models here that take at least a weaker system into Central America over the weekend. And there are some ensembles that still show this in the Western Gulf and show potentially a pretty significant storm. Now, it's fewer ensembles than a few days ago, but we still have at least some guidance indicating a stronger system up in here, but quite possibly a weaker system down in here, which is kind of what I would lean towards at this point. But we're not yet ready to rule this out just yet, and I'm going to show you why in just a little bit. The GFS ensembles kind of in the same boat here. Let me find my screen. Whoops, there we go. And you can see here, again, not a lot of development until we get into the Western Caribbean here towards Friday and Saturday. A lot of uncertainty here. Very few show this going up towards the Eastern Gulf or towards the Southeast. A lot more showing it across the Southwestern Gulf. But interestingly, it's not just going to go in necessarily and die. There's quite a few ensembles that take this up, slow it down, and eventually try to curve it back up towards Texas, maybe even Louisiana. So just something I'll be watching for you guys here. Just a trend we're monitoring, not necessarily an official forecast yet. Again, it hasn't formed. But if something gets down into here, we've got a front coming down in this direction. And what that's going to do is change things around quite a bit where this system may get stuck in here and try to find an avenue to come north again. Of course, that's if it can separate itself from land and actually develop. So here's a look at the European from earlier today. This model no longer showing development in the Gulf. It's just switched completely. We just see unsettled weather moving through the Western Caribbean and into the Southwestern Gulf, but nothing really forming. You can see very fast wind flow aloft. There's actually going to be a front right in here, so that protects the northern Gulf Coast early next week for the time being. There might be a weak system in here if the European is right, but this front is getting a little bit farther south, and that's obviously a good sign for those of you on the northern Gulf Coast. If we look a little bit closer at it, you can kind of see that here as well. where we've got our wave that's struggling to form into anything. It sort of moves towards Belize and the southern Yucatan. There'll be rain for sure. There'll be some gusty wind, but not necessarily a formed feature here. And then just nothing really forms. But other models disagree. The Canadian is starting to show something here. It's not as strong as what the GFS is showing. I'll get to that in a little bit. But does show a weak system here that does survive in this pocket of warm water here over the Bay of Campeche towards Saturday and Sunday. The Canadian model is taking it inland. That is from the 0Z. I'll show you the 12Z because it's quite possible it could look a little bit different. Yeah, the 12Z is trending north a little bit here, more towards northeastern Mexico, but does not develop it into much of a system. Now, the Icon model, I know a lot of people have talked about how great it did during Barrel. It has got a problem right now here, and I will show that to you guys. The feature that is near the Texas coast, it is developing into a system and keeping it there for the entire week. This is an extreme anomaly to all the other models. It shows this low continuing to spin up, and as a result, anything that tries to sneak across from the Caribbean is going to get sheared apart by this wave. At this point, I think it's a huge outlier, and I'm just going to put a big X on it. I don't think this system forms and comes down this direction. If it does, then the Icon can throw a party later, but right now I don't think that happens. And then the GFS from earlier is the one model that continues to off and on show a threat to the Gulf Coast, but a lot of uncertainty. It does develop this in the very warm waters north of Honduras towards next Saturday and Sunday into a stronger tropical storm. It actually hits Belize City here. The system will weaken over land, but then brings it back into the Bay of Campeche. And this particular run from earlier keeps it fairly weak as it's struggling to separate from land here. Does not actually have much landfall. In fact, it just kind of sticks around into the Western Gulf. And eventually, now I don't necessarily want to show this to you guys, but I'll just do it anyway just because it's there and you can find it anyway for yourselves. Takes the system up kind of like a Hurricane Zeta back from 2020, hitting south of New Orleans as a strong hurricane. But the GFS has shown some wild solutions, and until we get even this system to form, if it does, I just don't know if we can really trust it at this point. The latest model is not showing that solution. If you look at the GFS and you go back to the 0Z here, you're just going to see some funky stuff. I mean, maybe that happens, but I've yet to see something like that. If you go back a day to the models from a few days ago, you can see it brought it up through the Yucatan. So everything shifted west. So again, yeah, every 3 or 4 runs is probably going to show something threatening the North Gulf, but not necessarily going to be the case here. And here's a reason why. If you look at the upper level pattern here, the GFS, it is taking the southern part of this wave and just running with it. It's running with this idea that it's strengthening quickly here. The wave down in here has not formed, but it's just holding on to this little vorticity area and saying, look, this is going to spin up into a mini monster here by the time it gets to the weekend. It's not too likely to happen. I mean, does it happen? No one can say for sure until we get to that point. But if that happens, then it's got a trackable feature that will have a chance to survive by next weekend. Again, that's just one idea. It's just taking and running with it. So stay tuned at this point. We are not really going to have a great handle on this until Thursday or Friday as it passes Jamaica and moves towards Honduras and Belize. At that point, if it hasn't formed, I think we're in pretty good shape. If it does try to form, then it's going to be how quickly does that happen, and does it form farther east like the GFS, or does it stay weak and move quickly like the Canadian shows? So we're not going to know for a few more days. Let's look at the Western Pacific real quick. This is Tropical Storm Yagi pulling away from Luzon. This is something that I'm very concerned about for portions of southern China. If you take a closer look, you can see a pretty good area of development here just north and west. It actually strengthened over land, weakened a little bit, and now it's starting to flare right back up. And as a result, the tropical models are super aggressive with this, probably too aggressive, but you can see showing a strong typhoon. This is going to be Thursday night, Friday morning near southern China, moving towards Macau or just north, and then moving over the Gulf of Tonkin and weakening at that point. And a lot of uncertainty with this system, as you can see here. Does it stay over water? Does it try to make landfall? Again, nothing is easy to forecast this time of year, but the official forecast, and this is from Zoom Earth, shows this becoming a typhoon here in about 12 to 24 hours, and then strengthening to a very strong typhoon Thursday, threatening northeastern Hainan, and then continuing towards Vietnam and weakening as a weaker typhoon. So again, I'll keep you guys posted on that for those who have family over there. We always want to watch these systems no matter where they're at. Hope you guys have a great Labor Day. Thank you so much for your time today. Please consider subscribing and becoming a member of my community. You can say that this is hype, but look, until something forms, we're just going to have to just look at potential. And if it doesn't form, then, I'll clearly admit that it's a false alarm. And, the trends are certainly more encouraging in the Gulf here than they were a couple days ago, but we still need to watch. And as always, I will keep you guys posted until this looks like it's either a threat or no longer a threat. So I hope you guys have a great day. As always, I want to give all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. God has been good. He's been good to all of us, and he's just been the reason I'm do what I do every day, the ability to have a calling and to bless other folks through this opportunity here, just to share the good news with you guys, no matter what you believe. I think a lot of you may believe in God, but you don't believe necessarily what I believe, and I am happy to just welcome you to this channel. I personally believe that my channel would be a lot larger if I didn't even talk about God. I think the world doesn't want to hear about that. Some folks may want to do that, but I truly believe this channel will be at least twice as big if I didn't talk about God. But I'm not here to please folks. I'm here to please God because he's done so much for me, for what he's done and what he's sacrificed. The prophet Isaiah says, Isaiah 25:6 through 8, that on this mountain the Lord Almighty will prepare a feast of rich food for all peoples, a banquet of aged wine, the best of meats, and the finest of wines. On this mountain he will destroy the shroud that enfolds all peoples, the sheet that covers all nations. He will swallow up death forever. The sovereign Lord will wipe away the tears from all faces. He will remove his people's disgrace from all the earth. The Lord has spoken. And that, my folks, is the good news, that our Lord is there to wipe away all tears and to remove all burden from us. The Lord has spoken, and Jesus is coming again one day. And even though folks may not believe what I believe, I want to follow somebody who is going to save me from the sure death that is coming. And I pray that you do as well. So if you do have any prayer requests, I'm happy to spend some time praying for you here this holiday weekend. And I'll catch up with you guys again soon. Have a wonderful day. See ya.